Greg?
Yeah, this meeting is being videotaped, and it can be found a link on our website as well as YouTube.
Great.
And roll call vote?
Jane,
Present.
Alan,
Present.
Mike,
Present.
Raina,
Present.
Karen,
Present.
Michelle,
Present.
Bill.
Yes.
Bill, if you change your name to Michelle, and Steve,
I'm present.
and I'm here as well, and we have Mary
Yeah.
Broderick with us. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to see all of you. With you. Looks like you have more light outside there than we do here.
Not much.
Pretty dark.
Are you still down? Are you still in Florida?
No, I haven't been in Florida.
Oh,
Were you
okay.
asking
All
me?
right. Okay, so, oh, that was one of your references that called from Florida. I
Oh.
appreciated it.
Oh,
Yeah.
don't know who that was.
Angela. That was Angela. Okay, so what we wanted to do, Mary, is everyone's reviewed your resume, and you have an amazing resume, great experience. I'll just say that everyone that I talked to was just saying your praises about how well you be as a facilitator and your skills and so forth. So I thought give you a minute to just introduce yourself, and your statement of purpose was great because you captured in your resume materials, exactly what it is that we wanted you to do. So thank you for that. And so maybe you could talk a little bit about how you would plan to go about it, or any skills that didn't come out in your resume. We've got about 10 minutes to 15 minutes. And I know you have to go to another meeting.
Right.
So we'll try to respect your time as well. Hopefully we'll have a little bit of time to ask some questions.
Yeah,
And,
I would hope
so
that
we'll
we would
get
have the
started.
opportunity. Yes. Actually, one of my very favorite things to do in the world is to engage communities about what they value. And I have had the great privilege of helping communities throughout the state conduct really healthy, worthwhile conversations about educational topics. And they haven't shied away from the really tough ones. And invariably, people have come away from those conversations feeling that those things happen too rarely. It's an important way to hear varying perspectives about critical issues, and to demonstrate that democracy can work if we listen to one another effectively. And so my work through community conversations really was to leave that skill in the community, so that you had trained moderators and recorders in the community who knew how to essentially create a place where people could come together and talk about what they believed about any given issue and have a constructive, healthy conversation about it that didn't devolve into rancor and name calling, but had people behaving respectfully. So in addition, I have conducted searches for superintendents and principals and all throughout the state of Connecticut. And I think one reason I've been really successful with placements is that I listen really carefully. I listen to what stakeholders want to tell me about the strengths, the challenges, and what they would like to see in a new leader. And write a really comprehensive leadership profile, which has guided the board in selecting the right person. So I listen really carefully. People know that they've been heard, and then I can capture that all and synthesize the data into a report that helps to guide effectively. And I use surveys as part of that process as well. So in a way, the superintendent search process that I've used for the last 8 years is kind of similar to what you would like to do, where you try to speak with as many stakeholders as possible, find the common ground, find the themes that emerge from that, and then present that to the board so that, or to the decision-making bodies so that they are best prepared to make an effective decision. And I know part of that is coming to it with a really unbiased perspective. So not having my own, oh, I wish you'd do this, that comes through. You don't want that at all. You want to really be viewed as unbiased. So lots of experience with it. It would be a pleasure to work with all of you. And I'd love to entertain any questions that you have. And you
That's
asked
great.
how
Why
I was
don't I just,
holding. Yeah, maybe I should just address it. I'll give people a second to think about questions, but I would imagine that sitting with the steering committee would right up front and sort of laying out who are the stakeholders you'd want to engage, what kind of parameters you'd like to establish for that. I would love to see a published schedule so that people, if they can't make one meeting, could make another. If they want to come to a Zoom meeting instead of in person, they could do that. Just provide as much flexibility as possible. And then collect all that information, simultaneously having the survey out there, and then draw all that, you know, I would try to get that all done before, I would say, the first week in December, which is ambitious, so that because I don't think you want to bump up against shopping time. But so now
that is very, yeah, no, that's very, very aggressive and probably very timely. As you know, because of COVID, we haven't been able to get out and talk to the various stakeholders. So this is a critical juncture. And I don't know whether or not we'll end up asking for your recommendation when you do this, or more or less report out all your results and shy away from that in order to help you not try to formulate an opinion, you know, of what you think, you know, you would recommend. I think that would, in fairness, that would give you an opportunity to really talk to everyone and then just report back the various findings that you have.
Right.
Let me open up this to people that would like to talk. So just sort of wave and people can ask their questions.
Is that Mike?
Mike.
Sure, thank you. Well, first, it's nice to meet you, Mary.
You,
I have, number one, Alan, I agree. I don't think we're looking for recommendations. As my understanding is that what we want to hear from the community is what they would like a combined regional school district to provide. So I'm not sure it's really, I'm not sure. I mean, I think we want to hear as many different things as possible with, as well as hearing if there are, common themes. I mean, if there's something that 90% of the people want as a, you know, and something else that maybe only 2% of the people want, it's important to know that. But I'm not sure, that's a little different from a recommendation. Following up on the point that, Mary, that you just made, do you see a problem with the timing of this? I mean, it seems kind of rushed to me in terms of, we're just talking with you, it's almost the 1st of November. You're talking about getting everything done by the beginning of December. Realistically, is that enough time?
I think it probably is. I'm just, as a point of comparison, a superintendent search usually takes 90 to 120 days or so. And the time consuming part is listening to the community. It's not, yes, you have to wait for applications to come in, and you have to recruit, but that time up front listening to the community is probably the most important time. And that generally can be set up, maybe giving people about 2 weeks lead time. And then I would imagine it would probably take several weeks to make all these meetings in your 6 communities. But getting a schedule out there, I think the data could all be collected. I'm not sure that the report could be finalized by the end of December, but it could be done pretty close to that. I do think you want to avoid mid to late December for focus groups. That's just not good timing to get people out. There is something about it being dark that makes it hard to go out to.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah, those are good points. And the other thing, it's not only hearing, what people would want in so I'm going to build off what Mike said, what they would want in a newly formed district, but it's also to hear from people, what do they see as the pros?
Yeah.
What do they see as the cons? What do they see as concerns? So, you're collecting all of that. And I like your time frame of publishing. And the report doesn't have to be, submitted to DESI, December 31st. We wrap things up, and generally what has happened, we've had a couple of weeks thereafter before we got everything in. So there's a little bit of time for you to be able to methodically put together your interim report, reflecting on what you learned. But so there's a little breathing room there. I agree with you 100%. Get everything done before the shopping part comes. So David joined us. I want to just recognize that. Deb Loomer, I think I saw your hand earlier.
Yep, I have a question, and I apologize for my lateness. You might have already answered this, Mary. Nice to see you. Do you think that you would at some point want to have both of the school districts together at some sort of a public forum, or do you think it's best to just have them in their separate communities? Just a thought.
It's a very interesting question, and it does strike me that at first in the information gathering, and you know your communities better than I do, obviously, much better. And so I would want to be guided by your thinking on that as well. But it does seem that you want to make it as easy as possible for people to come out or to join via Zoom or Google Meet or whatever the case may be. But it does, I'd be happy to do it if the group decides that doing it as a joint community meeting would work. And maybe that would be the way to go for the reporting out to the community of the findings versus the gathering of the information that goes into the findings. That's something we could talk about.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. You could have a forum that everyone's invited to from all the communities and hold one in Gil Montague, or one there, and hold one in one of the pioneer districts. So, that's a good question. And we can talk about how that part would roll out. Other questions? Michelle.
Yes. Hi, Mary.
Michelle.
I'm on the, my name's Michelle. I'm on the school committee for Pioneer Valley Regional School District. And one of the things that I've noticed in public forums that the community is so frustrated about is if they ask a question and no one has the answer. And
Right.
so I am sure there's going to be a lot of questions out there. How are you going to get back to the community in a timely, because I think you're going to have to ask us the answers to those questions.
Yeah, I would definitely have a Q&A sheet up on the wall if we were in person, and capture the question there, make sure I get the question right. And then make sure that I have contact information for everybody who's present, and then get the answers and then send the responses out. That would be my approach. But
So
just
you would-
Michelle.
I'm sorry.
What?
Michelle, I should probably say that when I talked to Mary and the other candidate, I did say that it would be my expectation that we'd have a scribe there so that she could focus on the facilitation and the listening and so forth, and someone could be a scribe to help capture what was said, and that we'd also have a couple people there from the committee in any of the forums or the remote meetings, so that if there was a question, she could tactfully kick it over to us, that we could just provide a very quick answer and then move it right back to her for the facilitation part. Because it would be unrealistic to expect her to know, we've been doing this for 2 years,
Right.
you know, all of the intricacies of this. So we'd be there to sort of help guide that very quickly, but make sure the focus is on her interaction with the stakeholders.
Yeah, and I'm just going to throw that out. Some of us, you know, that are there may not even have the answers. So we just have to be aware of that to get those out there in a timely manner.
Michelle, that was always an issue with community conversations. And my approach in those would be to say, does anybody here have the answer? I would prefer not to be the one with the answers, because then you look like the expert, and I don't want to take on that role because that makes me look biased, right? So I would ask if anybody has the answers, and if it can't be answered to the satisfaction of the individual asking the question or of the group, then we'd capture it and get the response out. And maybe it's a matter of collecting the questions that come up through the process and then publishing the answers to them as part of the report too.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
See, Karen.
Hi, hello, Mary. I'm Karen O'Neill, and I'm also a school committee member from the Pioneer Valley Regional School District. And I'd like to know, beyond what reading maybe the consultants' reports, what additional information would you like to have about our 6 communities before you would undertake this process?
Well, in some ways, I think that what I can gather, I hesitate to say I want to do a lot of research, because in a way I like to go in with fresh eyes and to hear what the community has to say. I have a little bit of a sense of it just from having been kind of backroom support for some of the Mars work that was going on last spring. But I'm happy to learn whatever you think would be helpful for me to learn. I'm a little bit familiar with the area. I am not an expert in the area, for better and for worse, right? I'm sure each community has its great strengths and its great challenges. And I would imagine some of that may emerge as part of this process, understanding that.
I think the idea of fresh eyes is a good one. We can get deep in the weeds and forget the long view. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
All right, we're going to try to finish up. I know you said you had you have another meeting you have to go to.
Right.
And I don't see any other hands. Do you want to have, I can have you make any final comments you want to make before you run to your next meeting?
I just think it would be delightful to have the opportunity to work with all 6 towns. It is an ambitious schedule, but it would be a real opportunity to get to know. I know the route to the Mohawk Trail pretty well, but would really enjoy the opportunity to help your community feel that their voices are heard as part of this process, because there's nothing more powerful than building that kind of support through asking people to be involved in thinking about it. And there's huge power in that. I've witnessed it over and over, and it would be great to help you explore that. And I would just enjoy working with you. So hope you'll take my proposal seriously. Thank you. Thanks very much for this opportunity as well. Okay.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
You take care. Bye.
You too.
Bye.
Okay, Nadine is ready to come in, so I will let her in. Can you hear us, Nadine?
Hi Nadine, how are you?
Hi, good. How are you?
Thanks for
Good.
coming.
It's nice
Thank you.
to see you after the conversations on the phone for so much.
I know it's true, Alan.
I
Good to
enjoyed
see
talking
you.
with you. So what we'd like is, we have a little bit of time to have you sort of present some of the things that you bring to the table and perhaps a little bit about how you think you might proceed in this process. I hope I answered your questions and, gave you enough background to understand what we were trying to do. I think where you've had that experience, you know some of the ins and outs. So then we're going to have an opportunity for people to ask questions, and then you can give us your parting thoughts.
Okay,
So we'll turn it over to you.
sounds great.
um,
Thank you. Thank you so much, Alan. It was great meeting with you the other day as well and having conversation. And I want to thank all of you for the opportunity to be here tonight. It's great to see some familiar faces on the screen. So it brings back some memories, some good ones, of course, but just a little bit of my background. As most of you know, I have been a superintendent for Gil Montague. I've also was the special education director for Gil Montague. Since that time, I have been a superintendent of schools for Berlin-Boylston Public Schools. And when I originally started there, they were 3 separate districts. And it took, we did a lot of work in the 5.5 years that I was there in doing some framework to develop it, the 3 different school systems as one unified school district, which now it's one regional school system. And since then, I have also received my PhD in research and evaluation in education. And I served as an executive director for an educational collaborative in Eastern Massachusetts, and was also the curriculum executive director for senior director for teaching and learning for curriculum development for Brookline Public Schools. I have also worked in partnership with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. I work under a few capacities with the department. One, the Department of Education actually has 2, they have 4 special education leadership institutes. And I actually am the lead facilitator for one of their statewide institutes, which is for the experienced special education directors across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. This is my 3rd year as a lead facilitator. I've also last year was hired as the co-coordinator for the new Special Education Leadership Institute. And so I help out in both of those quite extensively across the state. But one important facilitation that we worked on, and Ellen, I don't know if you were able to talk with Jamie Camacho at all from the Department of Education, but I worked very closely with her as well as a team within her department. For 2 years, the state of Massachusetts was trying to redefine the IEP improvement process. And it was an IEP improvement project. And they actually had 3 prongs. And I was in charge of facilitating one of those 3 prongs for 2 years, where I reached out to over 30 statewide organizations. I worked with all of the districts across the state of Massachusetts. We had anywhere from 300 to 500 participants in this facilitation process. And we identified a document that the Department of Education wanted us to review and revise and provide recommendations. And we also worked with advocates. So we had school system advocates, we had parent advocates, we had legal counsel, and we had to recruit all of those individuals, and we had monthly and in some cases bi-weekly and in other cases weekly meetings in really trying to look at this document, identifying questions and surveys and getting feedback. I then had to take all of that documentation, which the stack was probably about this thick, to be honest, of qualitative research, and had to put it all together and provide an overarching summary report to the Department of Education, at which I presented to the Deputy Commissioner of Special Education, Dr. Russell Johnston. So I did that. I'm very proud of that work. Because of that work, if you go on the Department of Education website, there's now new revised documentations and outlines and reviews that have actually come out of that. And I think the department did a great job at taking our summaries and recommendations and bringing them forward. So that's some of the work. And I have since I received my PhD in research and evaluation, I started my own business. I provide program reviews to districts. I do facilitation. I do mentoring, counseling, coaching, you name it, pretty much I've done it. And this past year, I have served as the interim superintendent in Greenfield with Dr. Judith Houle. We were hired through Management Solution to do that work. I have also worked as the interim special education director in East Windsor, Connecticut until October, Indigenous Peoples Day. And then I also have been the business manager for Mohawk Regional School District since last November, on top of doing my other work. So all of that is behind me. And now I'm just focusing just on my consultation and that type of work. So I've been busy, but I love what I do. So.
All right, and in our conversations, we laid out, your responsibilities of going out and talking to the stakeholders and collecting information.
Oh,
So
sure.
I think you're pretty clear on what it is we want you to do. Be interested to get your thoughts on how you would like to proceed, or how you think you might go about that work. Put that in the back of your mind for now. I'm going to open it up for people to ask questions.
Okay, sounds great.
Michelle?
Hi, Nadine. I'm Michelle Druso from Leiden. I'm on the PVRSD school committee. So you are very knowledgeable about this area, having been in Mohawk and Greenfield. How do I frame this question? So the plight, I think, of small towns in Western Mass and their budgets and the challenges of how we are losing students. And you can look at this from both sides. You can look at it from a financial side, or you can look at it from an education side. So I think when we go with the public forums, there's going to be a lot of different questions asked, and we won't necessarily have all the answers. And believe me, in the past couple of months, I've been involved with a lot of public forums. And if you don't have the answers, if people sitting up front don't have the answers, people just get angrier and angrier. And I'm just wondering how you would approach that as a facilitator.
Great question, Michelle. I have to say, in my experience as a superintendent, we get asked a lot of questions publicly, and we don't always have the answer. So you have to know how you're going to, calm the waters, so to speak. So, my response obviously is, I want to validate the importance and the significance of the question. I am not one to just throw out an answer and say, this is what I'm thinking. If I really don't know, I have to be, I'm very honest, and I have to honestly say, that's a really great question. I didn't think of it in that framework or in that way. But I always say to them, I will get back to you within 48 hours. I would try to get an answer or at least a response. And I know you do a lot with marketing right now. So I would work with your marketing subcommittee to have an ongoing question and answer there. And I would tell them to just look it up. And if they don't see it, to feel free to reach out to me right away and give them my contact information. But I'm very adamant about follow through. And I'm very adamant about the fact that they need that information. They're nervous, they're uptight. If I have it, I'd love to give them a resource to let them know where to find it if I don't have the answer. But I definitely would want to work. I believe you have a subcommittee that's been working a lot with public relations. So you have a public relation administration subcommittee. So I would definitely want to work with that subcommittee to make sure that we're getting that message out there. And I do think through this process, a great way, I know for us, when I worked with this as a superintendent in Berlin-Boylston, we had to have a public link where it was always question and answers, where people could ask the questions, and we would try to get it out there within 24 to 48 hours, right up onto that site. So it wasn't out there for a week or 2 weeks. And if you couldn't do it and you had to get some research on it, we at least would put the question up and say answers forthcoming so that they don't think it's being disregarded.
That I never thought about using technology, because you're right. What you said at the end, people don't think you're disregarding them. I like that idea. Thank you.
Absolutely, Michelle. Thank you.
Karen,
Hi,
Hi, Karen.
nice to meet you, Nadine.
Thank you.
I'm Karen O'Neill, and I, along with Michelle, we're on the Pioneer Valley Regional School District School Committee. There will be a number of people who may recognize you because you worked for several years with the Gil Montague Regional School, not just school district. And I don't know quite how to phrase this, but there will be some people who will be a little skeptical in our district because of several factors. Gil Montague has taken the lead on the grant that we are using to investigate this. And they are a larger district, and there may be some fears that they're just going to be subsumed. And with people being able to recognize you or having read some of your background, they may be a little bit worried. So what would you do to ease those kinds of concerns?
So again, I'm very honest and open. I'm very, I have an open policy, So my first and foremost is actually to address that. And so if a question does come up and that is a concern, I want to rest assured that I value my degree as an evaluator. And, I have to be an objective evaluator. And yes, I have a history with Gil Montague, but that is a long time ago. And a lot has happened in that period of time with the organization. There's a lot of administration that are no longer there. I actually looked up to see, and so none of them have worked with me in the past, including the superintendent. So, I'd have to say that, yes, I know the background, but I also know the background of Mohawk. And, I also have been very friendly with a former special ed director from Pioneer Valley, Sharon Jones, actually, is a friend of mine. And so I remember when I was a special ed director, I got to learn a lot about Pioneer Valley as well as Gil Montague through the special ed lens, of course.
Yes.
But I have to say that in all honesty, I would have to just openly address that, and I would want to be visiting and having just as equal opportunities with Pioneer as I would with Gil Montague. So it wouldn't be shown as favoritism in any way. Same questions, same responses, same amount of visibility in both regions.
Thank you. I really appreciate that answer.
Thank you, Karen.
Alan?
Deb? Yes.
Hi, Nadine.
Hi, Deb.
I'll ask you the same question that I asked the other candidate. Do you anticipate meeting with the communities involved separately? Or do you think that having them meet as an entire group, all 6 towns, would be advantageous? Have you thought about any strategy to your advantage of knowing the area, how you think you might go about that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Deb. And I think, first I'd want to work with the 6-town regional planning board to see how they would like me to facilitate that. But my initial thought is coming in new, I would want to start with the smaller groups first, I think, to get a feel of how each town is feeling about this, because sometimes in my experience of any type, this is a complex change, right? So I always refer to, and it's from back in, I think, early 90s, but it's the Noster model. Alan, you might remember that, I don't know, but with complex change. And there can be a lot of frustration or a lot of anxiety. And in order for people to start feeling comfortable to have this cross conversation with one another. They need to feel safe first to have these open conversations and questions independently first. Once those are vetted out and they're feeling more comfortable, then I think we could start branching out and expanding. And I also think it depends upon the topic that we'll be discussing at that open forum, how challenging those topics may be. So, I think it's really going to vary, and I'd have to see the temperature of, of the zones before we would bring it. You bring everybody all together, facilitating all together. When I did this with the state, I had to, for the IEP improvement project, for example, we first had those that were not, their primary role was not an educator. So I had the state organizations and the advocates, and I had the parent attorneys and the parents first. And then I brought the school staff in another realm, and I started to get the feel before I could actually merge them together. And I think I would want to do the same here.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Karen, did you have a follow-up? I want to ask Mike after. I see you're lit up, so I don't know if you had a follow-up, Karen.
No, that was the cat that just jumped on my lap. Sorry. Thank you.
Oh. Okay. Mike?
Thank you. Hi, Nadine.
Hi, Mike. Good to see you.
Well, good to see you. My question has to do with the timing. My impression is that what we're asking has a pretty aggressive timeline. And I just wonder, I'd like to hear your thoughts about how really, number one, I assume we think it can work, but how will it work? Or how could it work? Because it seems to me that it's a lot to ask to get all this done in the time available.
Well, I think, Mike, you have a little bit of an advantage knowing me as well as Deb. I kind of am a 0 to 120 kind of gal. So I know how to take something and bring it a little bit rigorous and bring it forward. I'm not one to miss timelines or deadlines. So that's definitely an issue I have if we miss a timeline and don't make it. But I have to say that I think first and foremost, I would want to meet with the chair to see what is it that you actually were envisioning. I know that, you have the various stakeholders. I'd want to know who are those various stakeholders that you'd want me to work with. What's the timeline that they meet? My schedule is actually very flexible. So I'm able to work within those timelines and to see if we need to do a morning meetings, afternoon meetings, or evening meetings, or weekend meetings, whatever that means. I had that flexibility within my schedule at this time. I guess that's kind of the luxury of having my own business. I can tell myself where I need to be at what days and what times. But I do think that it's definitely doable. You already have some of your research done already. I believe that the education committee was already developing the survey. I believe it was through SurveyMonkey. So, we can already get going on that right away. I don't see any kind of an issue. That to me would be the first piece, is really getting that survey out there. And, in my experience doing research, what we're finding is that, if you're going to do it via email or expect people to do a survey via email, you send out the email notification on Thursday nights. That's the most common day that people will respond. And then you do a reminder on a Sunday night, and then you do it again on a Thursday night. Those are the golden rules in survey administration and electronics. So, but, and I think that we can get it going. I don't see an issue with it at all. I very much love aggressive timelines because it keeps you focused, it keeps you on task, and it does not allow you to get caught up in these rabbit holes, and you just keep the focus on task. So I don't see an issue with the timeline that you have. I can see where we're going to just start right away with the survey. I'm going to immediately have to know when the stakeholders are. We'll look at the timeline of when we can put it on. I tend to do a backwards design. What I mean by that is, when do you want the final report done by? And then we work backwards from there. What steps has to get done in order to do it? And how can we plug it in within the timeline? And I'd want to meet regularly to let you know the update. Where are we at? I don't want to leave a report, a summary report at the very end. I want us to see how we're developing it as we go.
So just as a follow-up, Mike, and to the full planning board members, when I spoke to the candidates, I did let them know that who the stakeholders were, and that it might make sense to meet in, like in each one of the schools. Let's say an elementary school, we work with the principal to have it publicized so that parents could come either, in the evening, and then a remote meeting if they're uncomfortable with that, and maybe even an in-person if they didn't want to talk in front of folks, where they could come into a conference room and sit down, and there'd be some hours available, for people to have, maybe one-on-one conversations if that need be. And we have to figure out how to reach out to people that can't attend meetings, can't go to a forum, or are technology savvy. So we'll have to give some conversations there. And I think, Deb, you had brought up the suggestion of, meeting in the schools with the staff and the teachers and stuff. So I think we can streamline it there. Both candidates are aware of that. I also informed both candidates that we had written a second grant, and we'll wait to see if we get that, but and we would have to put that back out to bid again because of the amount, but the idea behind that would, we get this process started. We've had limited opportunities to talk to the stakeholders. This would give us a chance to get that started in a 2-month period, maybe wrapping that interim report up in my mind, because it's the first time out to get that. And then if we get the second grant, or the new grant, we'd continue this work, sharing everything that was in that report and doing that for January, February, March, April, and then having a pretty good comprehensive thing, because that would have given us 5 more months, and then have that follow-up finalized report.
Mhm.
So both candidates are aware of we've applied for another grant so that we could continue that, hopefully to continue the work. Does anyone else have a question? Okay, Nadine, thank you so much. I want to give you an opportunity to maybe have sort of a closing statement, or whatever you want to call it, parting
Sure.
words.
Sure. Again, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity tonight, meeting all of you. I know this is a very daunting task that you're all, up against and working towards. It is not my first time trying to put together complex organizations and putting together reports. I understand the educational aspect. I think for me, I'm hoping that through this work, we can also try to, learn from the educational opportunities that you could be serving for your students and for the children in the community. I'm really hoping that as a facilitator, I can help you in identifying some of your own concerns of each individual community. But I thank you again, and I really feel that with the experience and the background I have, I can pull it together and help facilitate. I have great, I think I have, a great reputation in working out in the community. I think when I was Gil Montague, for example, as their superintendent, it was the first time in many years that Gil Montague had passed a budget the very first time going out. And that has to do with a lot of the communication that we had with our finance committees, our select board, and other stakeholders in the community, and understanding the process, putting together 3-year projections so that we could understand where we were all coming from and working as a team. I had the teachers union went to the school committee to ask the school committee to give me a consecutive contract because we had worked really well with the teachers union. I did through a very challenging time for Gil Montague when they were a level 4 district. So I feel like I like to make relationships. I like to really work with people. I'm very hands-on, so they would see me in the buildings. I'd want to see the differences so that I know how I can facilitate and talk respectfully among all of the communities at large. So thank you again, and I hope to see you all again soon.
All right, thank you so much. Excellent.
you.
We've enjoyed this time.
Good to see you. I've enjoyed it as
All right.
well. It's great to see some familiar faces and nice meeting new ones. Take care.
Bye.
All right,
Bye-bye.
thank you. Bye. Well, we have two crackerjack candidates, so I guess let's have a conversation and deliberation about what are your thoughts on who would be the best fit for this task in the short term, and if it comes to pass, the long term.
I would like to hear from Deb and Mike and Greg, right, too? You knew Nadine? No. Greg
Michelle,
and Mike.
How about Bill and Steve?
Before my time.
Bill and Steve, did
Oh,
they?
Bill, okay.
I mean, I can speak to the relationship she had with the staff, and I think it was a very good one. I think she reached, I mean, I have to tell you that when I was short a skiing chaperone to go up the Berkshire East, I actually called her and she said, sure, I'll go skiing with your class. She's a hands-on person. You know, she will do whatever needs to be done to get the job done. And I think she, you know, once again, we all know how teachers unions on, and I, you know, negotiated with her. I think all of the stakeholders were very happy with how she was running things. Now, Mike was financial, so that might not be, I don't know what Mike's thinking, but the thing that stuck out for me, hearing her talk, was the fact that she has done one of these in the Berlin-Boylston district. That to me, above anything else, she knows what has to happen. And she knows the process of how long it can take and that sort of thing. So that's something that I don't know, that was a piece. But yeah, as a collaborative person, she's wonderful. She's wonderful.
I really liked Karen's question. I thought it was a really, really good question, and I wasn't sure how she would approach that. But I thought she gave a really fair, honest answer to that question, because I think it would, you know, it could be out there. When you're a superintendent, not everyone likes decisions you make. And so, you know, there may be people that were like, oh, she's back, you know, and there'll be others that say, wow, she was just terrific when she was here. So I think her comment about getting right out in front of it and addressing that was a good way to approach it. Bill, did you have an interaction with her and Steve?
No, the name was familiar, and I was interested when I saw the amount of experience she had here in Gil Montague. And my reflection on it was going to be to ask Michael and Deb what they thought, because I was quite sure that they both, but the fact that she held the positions that she did as SPED director, and then is in a transition, stepping up, taking an interim superintendency. It's certainly an impressive documentation she had, resume that she has. The woman has done nothing but immerse herself in school and the accomplishment of gaining a PhD in 2 different subject fields it's 2 things. One, it's impressive, and secondly, it makes you wonder, is this person strictly an academician? But I think meeting her to the degree that I just met her on television, she's certainly a personable individual. So that's my total reflection.
All right, thank you. Mike, looks like we're waiting to hear from you, because you did know her.
I did work with her for the time that she was superintendent. She came in right after a period of significant budget turmoil. And that turmoil had been resolved before she got there by the previous superintendent, who then had to leave sort of unexpectedly. And she had already left the district and was brought back as interim superintendent. And so I got to work with her in that capacity. My impression of her at the time was that she was very talented and she was very ambitious, and that Gilmani was too small a pond for her. And she ended up staying a year and then left. I think she is very talented. Following up on what Deb said, I think if we were looking for someone to manage the merging of the two districts, she might well be an excellent candidate. But that's the way I see it. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for someone to go out and find out what the community is looking for. And that's why, Alan, I was curious to hear what the reference said, because I didn't see a lot of experience on her part of having done that sort of thing. She has done a number of things. They've mostly been management things. Although there has been some experience working with groups, pulling groups together, but it didn't seem as focused on going out into communities and saying, how do you feel about this? Mary Broderick seemed to have a lot more experience to me in that particular area, and that's what we're looking for. So that was my impression. I actually like Mary better on the basis of what we heard tonight. But I'm trying to keep my mind open here and curious to hear what other people think. And Alan, what you learned from talking to references.
Yes, so let me just address that, and then, we can talk a little bit about Nadine, and when people are finished that, I do want to move over and focus a while on Mary. I will say that when I talked to a former school committee member, her name was Angela, and she was in the Berlin Boylston district. She spoke at length about how she went out into the community and talked to focus groups. There were over 50 focus groups, and that putting the reports together and working actually closely with Christine Lynch to file the reports and share the information. So she was not there when they finally actually merged, but she was doing all of the ground, much of the groundwork and meeting with focus groups and pulling that information together. So to address that, Mike, that was one of the highlights, I guess, that was brought to my attention. All of the references were phenomenal. On both sides, people felt that they would be great facilitators. It was interesting, and a couple people I spoke with, they actually knew both candidates. They weren't put as a reference. They came about in another way. Someone had called, and then they called me, and it was nice because they could give me a comparison of the two candidates. But at the end of the conversation, it was, you hit the jackpot. You can't go wrong. No matter who you hire as your facilitator, you're gonna be very, very pleased. So I said, thank you. And that's from two people who knew both candidates and could actually talk about the strengths of both. So I spent a lot of time on the phone with the various candidates, and there was nothing that was brought up as a concern. Engaging words that were used were very engaging with the communities, knows technology really well, very professional, easy to talk with, very fair. So there were just a lot of great comments and a lot of superlatives. So that applied to both. Other comments regarding Nadine, and then we can switch over to Mary. Marilyn? Yes? Len?
Yes, this is something I'm thinking that perhaps we should think of in regard to both candidates. I'm not going to talk about either one. Well, I can. I echo, and I was on Finance Committee when Nadine was super. So I have some connection with her. I think she's very hardworking. I think she's extremely competent. I think she's a very fine manager. I think she's extremely bright and she's very personable. What I'm wondering is that we have to think of our audience who, if we're going to consider this merger, who are the people we have to convince that it should go one way or another. So let's just keep that in mind, and how each of these people are going to interact with the people of our towns, who those people are, and who they will respond to best in terms of giving what they want to give. That's just my input on that.
Yeah, and thank you for that. I made it clear that they're not taking any side. They're not taking any position. Their role is strictly to hear what people have to say and to get that feedback and report it back. So that will be, obviously that's their major focus. I don't know if you meant to say that, but they do have to know the towns. Go ahead, Lynn. I think you have more to say.
But I'm also thinking, who is the person who is going to elicit the feedback? Who's going to get the best answers from the people that are going to be interviewed, who have to make the ultimate decision, which is our townspeople? Who is going to have the best, shall we say, simpatico with the facilitator?
Karen, you, I think, wanted to say something, or your cat's still teasing you?
No, thankfully she's comfortable somewhere else. I guess I have to talk about both. I hope that's all right, because
Sure.
there's a comparison to be made here. First of all, I was a little bit put off by Nadine's using her introductory time to repeat what was on her resume and not really telling us much about how she was going to move forward, which was in contrast to what Mary did. And you rightly noticed, Alan, that on her application, she actually laid out a plan, and she talked about how what she had done would help her be that facilitator, which I think is very important. And I also think that someone not maybe associated with any part of any district here might be a better fit, given that they are both very personable. So with that, I agree with Mike's conclusion that I think Mary would be the more appropriate choice.
Jane? You're on mute. I can't read lips yet.
Sorry
There we
about
go.
that. I have to agree with everything that Karen just said. I felt that Nadine had already reached the conclusion that it was going to become one district. And I don't think we can have somebody starting out that way. I was also just much more impressed with Mary. And I like the idea of having a fresh look coming in and not somebody who may come in with preconceived notions.
Okay, Steve.
Yeah, I'm also agree with that. I really liked how Mary started her presentation. And I don't know if it was because of how you asked her to start, but how she started speaking about listening. And I think that's part of the communication back and forth that we've not been able to have with the constituents of this process. And I think that's critical right now. We need someone out there that's going to be able to listen, to hear what people are saying, for us to then be able to respond to that. And so I really liked her emphasis on that. So that's where I would go.
Okay, Michelle, can you weigh in? I guess we're talking about both candidates right now, so feel free to do that.
Well, I'm pretty conflicted. That's why I was looking to listen to other people. I could go with either, to be honest with you, but I am now listening to people from the Pioneer District. I think they might be right to have a fresh candidate. Because I think people do sometimes have preconceived notions. But I'd also like to hear from Rena and what happened to David. Did he go? I think he's gone.
Yeah, he did go. Yeah, he's
Because
gone.
because there's a lot of us here from Pioneer, and if most of us are feeling that way, then I would suggest going with Mary. But I think both of them are very competent and capable.
So I'd just like to speak again briefly.
Yeah, please. Yes.
Once again, this is gut reaction. So probably not worded correctly. My concern becomes the negativity of the Pioneer people and how we have to, and it might be what we have to do, how we have to suit them. And so I'm feeling, but what about those people in Turner's Falls and in Montague and in whatever? Why are we thinking that this process has to be catered around what the Pioneer constituents think? Gut reaction, I'm not sure where I'm at, but that to me was from the first meeting, Dave, we met 2 years ago, is the frustration that I'm feeling right now after hearing all that. And it might be the way it has to be. But in any case.
Well, I appreciate what you said, Deb.
Oh.
Who's talking?
Lynn had her hand up.
I just want to say, do you want to share who you lean toward? Who?
Me?
Deb, you want to share who you had, who you're leaning toward?
I mean, I'll be honest with you, because I've worked with Nadine closely, I believe she relates to all those people. She relates to parents, she relates to kids, she related to the staff. I'm not concerned that she doesn't have the facilitation skills. She did that naturally. And so, I mean, once again, I would lean towards Nadine.
Okay. Lynn, did you want something to say something? I'm going to ask Raina.
Yeah, well, let's Rena speak first, because I've had a chance. And then I would like to.
Okay.
Sure. My impressions from looking at the applications was that Mary really had a more clear picture of what we need and what we're asking for at this point. And she had sort of a rough sketch of of the process that she would be following, and I didn't see that in Nadine's application. Nadine's she's very talented, and she seems very well qualified. I just felt like Mary had a more clear picture of what we're asking for right now, and I think she has a very clear goal of just gathering information, which is what we're looking for. Not to say Nadine couldn't do that, but I just I felt that Mary seemed to have a good picture of the timeline, and how she would start what the process that she would follow. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thanks. Lynn?
Okay, because of what I think a lot of other folks have said, Mary's demeanor is what is swaying me in addition to the attributes that the other folks that are speaking for her say. And I have no doubt that Nadine is marvelous, but I think the match, we're looking for a match. And I think Mary's the match in my eyes.
Okay, so far I have 6 people that are leaning toward Mary. Greg, you've been very methodical in your thinking as I'm watching your expression. Please share.
I would say I was pretty quiet in all my,
Yes.
I've not said anything. No,
Yes.
I just wanted to sit back and listen. I sit a lot at these meetings anyway, so, but I'm very torn because Mary has a very nice demeanor. I will say that. She seems to really enjoy facilitation for facilitation. I sort of get the sense that Nadine wants to put this again on a resume. And it's not to say anything bad about her. I think there's nothing wrong with that. But I sense she's very motivated to do things, which is a good quality for what we need to have done. So yeah, I'm really torn because a part of me likes the idea of getting a fresh start with Mary, that the job really is about not interjecting yourself and your experience, but being a listener and trying to create communication between us and the public. Nadine, I think, has experience here. So there's also that sort of connection to the community, which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing. I think she has some personal connection with Gil Montague and this region, and probably feels, connected to it in that way. And probably that was what drove her to apply for this. So I think it was with good intentions, not just, again, not just to put it on a resume. I also see her as being somebody that is very motivated in her career.
Yeah.
So I'm
like
very
this?
torn. I could go. I think they're both great candidates for different reasons. I'm not
Thank
even
you.
100% sure which way I would go right
Thanks.
now because they both bring very different benefits to what we're looking for. So yeah, I'm still very torn. That's why I haven't said anything. Looks like Michelle has her hand up.
No, I just wanted to clarify back to what Deb said. And it's hard to put into words, Deb, because, I was on the Heart Committee. I was chair of the Heart Committee, and I really believe in this process. But I think, and I don't know the pulse of Gil Montague. I don't know how Gil Montague is feeling, but I do know, and I do sense that there's, shall I say, some negativity from the, in the Pioneer District. I don't know where that comes from, because I surely felt it on the Heart Committee. People wanted to push back. So when I look at these candidates, I just want it to be on a par where people are going to feel comfortable to speak the truth, to speak from their heart, so we can get the pulse on the community. And as I said, I could go with either. So
you're
Yeah.
playing on Saturday.
So I guess my first preference after I looked at everything was I couldn't wait to meet the candidates and see, because I think I was leaning slightly toward Nadine, but I really much wanted to hear, what Mary had to say. I think that this is going to be, I would have to agree with Mike that if we move to a larger one and we needed someone to help facilitate that, there's no question with the experience she has, she would be a huge benefit to utilize her services. One of the things that comes out is that, listening to the communities, and in a way, we're listening to the communities before we're listening to the communities, because we already have kind of a pulse that, right or wrong, there's feeling of maybe more interest, I'll put it that way, in Gil Montague's minds, or some people, than it is in Pioneers. We want this person to be successful, whoever that would be. And we don't need, and I don't mean this in a negative way, we don't need to have an issue undercurrent that we have to explain or try to resolve or get in front of, because the focus really has to be all about getting information from people about what are the possibilities for a district if it's combined. What are the things you'd like to see? What are the problems you see? What are the benefits you see? And stay at that level, and not have to deal with an undertone that might be, well, they're also from or worked in Gil Montague. I don't want to put a label on that in terms of a negative, because I think it has a lot of positive benefits having her there, but I think people would have another issue to perhaps talk about, and it could get in the way of us trying to get information. If we do not select Nadine, I hope that we really have an open mind if we move to another level to utilize or consider utilizing her in other capacities. So that's sort of a review of where I'm coming from. I think if we don't have that issue possibly that could even exist with this outsider with fresh eyes that doesn't know a lot about our districts, then that's one hurdle that we don't have to try to deal with in presenting and collecting information. So if people want to respond to that, please do, because I'm just sharing, my thoughts, top of my head. And maybe when I go to bed, I'll say, that was a dumb thing to say. Does that make sense? Bill?
Yeah, am I muted? No, I'm not muted. I thought in the discussion with each candidate, I thought it was interesting that Mary took a much more stand back approach, whereas Nadine talked a lot about immersion and wanting to get a sense of to be engaged with the community way more than Mary was suggesting. And Mary made the point that she wanted to be seen as an objective, unbiased individual who was just receiving information. So certainly Nadine is a lot more aggressive in her approach. And I agree with several of the committee or the board that it's hard for me to make a choice, but I can certainly identify with the advantage of going with Mary as expressed by other members here. So I would go along with it. I can't say that I'll necessarily be able to pick one or the other.
Okay. Okay, fair enough. And I did like the answer of her, of Nadine saying she'd go into the schools, because sometimes to get the culture of the school and to really get a feel for it, I thought, wow, that was pretty impressive, because that would give her an understanding of the elementary schools and the high school and so forth and how that works. However, on the flip side, I guess when I put all of the reference checks that I did, I guess I would have to come out and say, people talk more about Mary's demeanor in not a laid back position, but a position of really engaging people by listening carefully and not appearing to ever be leading them in a direction, rather than listening and restating what she's hearing to make sure she's hearing it right. So I guess that would be a fine line that separates them a little bit in the reference checks. Mike?
Yeah, thank you. Number one, I agree with all the comments about Mary's demeanor. That's one of the things that makes her my first choice. I think it's probably the main thing, that she came across to me as someone who is really good at making the listener feel like it's important that they be heard, that she thinks it's important that they be heard. And I think that Nadine may be a very good listener. She's clearly a very talented person, but it's a little more about her when you talk with her, and a little less about you. I just wanted to follow up though quickly on Deb's point about trying to cater to Pioneer, because I'm siding. I like what Alan said about how in this particular process we don't want any kind of undercurrent that might cause problems. But I do want to acknowledge that Deb, I heard what you said, and I think that if that's a concern, I mean, it sounds that it is your concern. We as a committee should address that in some form. I mean, that sounds like it's bigger than just who we're going to get to do this particular job. And I personally hope that we don't just sort of say, sort of like move on as if it, without dealing with that in some way. So I just hope that we can do that, because it does sound like something that could be pretty serious, especially down the road, if this process proceeds, however it goes.
Yeah, through a facilitator, we might find we have more in common than not. Deb?
No, I was just going to say I appreciate that, Mike. And I know you said maybe we should address this, and this is something. Truthfully, it's been said when people join committees. It was said at the beginning. It really is about Pioneer is just negative about this idea, and that's been said by lots of people, and no one has really talked about what the Gil-Montague people think, because they think, well, our superintendent, put this idea forward. They've been writing the grants. So I'm looking at the Gil-Montague people as being open-minded. No one has, truthfully, I talk with people in the community, no one has really formed an opinion. They go, I don't know, yeah. But it really comes down to, how are we going to convince the people of the Pioneer School District that this is in the best interest of their students? And that to me is, and it might be unfortunate. And so I kind of agree and disagree with Mike. I don't think it's anything that's going to be resolved, because it's a reality. In my eyes, it's just a reality, and that's what we have to deal with. And maybe if we really believe in this thought about combining the districts, that's just the people who we have to convince.
Okay, I'm gonna try to keep us on topic and do it this way. Raina, I want to hear from you, hear from Jane, and then I want to wrap things up. I'll let Greg get the last thing to say. And let's wrap it up and take a vote and move on, and then I will contact the candidates. I think I really appreciate the conversation we've had here. It's been rich and it's been very insightful. So Raina.
Yeah, I just wanted to just add the comment that I really liked Mary's answer to Karen's question about that she wasn't the person, she didn't see herself as the person to have the answers, that she was going to be looking elsewhere to provide answers to questions. And Nadine, sort of her approach seemed more like she was going to be the expert to make sure that the questions get answered, or make sure she provides the answers to the questions. So that was just another impression of feeling I liked the Mary's approach more. So.
Okay, Jane, thank you.
I just want to speak to the negativity thoughts, because I come away from meetings very often feeling that it is the Gil Montague people who don't want any part of this. And they're just biding their time to wait to say no. So if we're talking about negativity, I think it's impressions that we get from things that people say, and we shouldn't put so much weight on it. I would remind everybody that it's the 4 towns of the Pioneer District that voted to have this group meet and go through this process. The school district did not vote to do it. It was the 4 towns. Thank you.
All right, so not to get into that debate.
I know, it's
I'm
the wrong
looking forward
place.
to facilitator. Greg, you get the last thing and then let's take a vote.
All right,
Greg?
I'll try to make it short. I just want to clarify my comment on the resume. It was really to point out the difference between what Mike said about Nadine has done a lot of things. And I think she does like to do a lot of things. So it wasn't to be negative. It was just to say, Mary, on the other hand, I think really likes the idea of being a facilitator. I mean, that seemed to come across very, very much in her speaking about facilitation and her enjoyment of it. That's the only sort of difference I was trying to make. As far as Gil Montague and Pioneer, I've heard both positive and negative from both districts. So, I think it depends on who you speak with. We all have our own sort of opinions and they come out sometimes, but overall, I think it's a mixed bag in both districts. I'm fine with either one. I think I sort of envision Mary being a good fit for now, and that once we have a lot, partly to have that sort of openness with the community and that sort of non-biased appearance. Not to say that Nadine would be biased, but having the non-biased appearance. And then once we have gathered a lot of information, that Nadine might be a better choice moving into sort of the final stages, because she could probably bring more context in a way that Mary couldn't. So that's my final saying. I'm done. We can vote.
Okay. All right. So here's how I'm going to proceed with the vote. I'm going to call on you and you are going to tell me either Mary or Nadine. I will have a column here and put your name under the candidate that you are selecting. I think in cases like this, that's the better way than to just put a name out and how many in favor of that and then do it again. So that way everyone has a chance to move through and say your preference. So I'm going to start with Deb Loomer, your preference.
Nadine,
Okay. And Lynn,
Mary,
and Steve,
I would go with Mary.
and Bill.
I'll go with Mary.
And Michelle?
Mary,
And Karen?
Mary,
Raina?
Mary,
And Mike?
Mary,
And Jane?
Mary,
And Greg?
Mary,
Well, I guess the chair's vote is immaterial.
We want to know it.
you got to vote,
Um,
Alan.
gotta vote, Ellen.
I will, for the only reason I said before is to make sure we don't have this cloud in any way, the difficult work that's going to happen. I will go with Mary. So we will, so that was the major business of this evening. I'm really glad that we had an opportunity to hear from the candidates and then have this kind of discussion. So there were several of you that said it would be important in your response to what Greg put out there. So thank you. I've learned a lot in not only the questions, but your thinking. We don't do enough of this, so we could just share our thoughts and you know, be open and honest about it. So I will contact each candidate. Now we have a Zoom meeting next November 2nd, next Tuesday. I will invite the candidate to, and that'll be at 6. I will invite Mary to that meeting. And I think the major agenda will be to have a conversation about ideas on how to proceed. I love the suggestion of let's publish, you know, sort of a calendar of all of the things that we need to be doing. And so be thinking about that so we can stay focused on that task, on working through how best to organize, give her information, listening to her questions so that she can organize her thoughts on how to go forward. So let's try to keep that really focused on that one item.
Alan, I'll make a
Greg?
motion. I'm going to make a motion to adjourn. I've
Any
got
thought?
my daughter is dying to get out of here. Oh, is he there? Did he freeze?
All right.
Is that
I'll
okay?
second
Yeah.
the motion.
I
Thank
think
you.
Deb seconded that. Deb, did you second that?
Yeah,
Yeah. All right. All those in favor?
aye.
I
Aye.
see
Aye.
Deb, Lynn, Michelle, Bill, Steve, Karen,
Yeah.
Raina,
Yeah.
Greg, Jane, and I. It's unanimous.
Yeah.
Good
so
evening. Thank you very much.
just an update. My daughter had her soccer game. It went into second overtime. So I missed the second overtime. I had to come into my office here, but they won. They won on the penalty kick, the second overtime. So,
Oh, great.
anyway, so she's
Congratulations.
ready to go home.
Bye.
They're playing.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks.
See you later. Bye.